Hello everyone, it's Rob Clark on a camera borrowed from Mr. Calvin Castine of Hometown Cable. And we're looking at a picture of the Windmill Point Lighthouse taken in September of 1988. The couple at the bottom part of the tower standing are the Admiral and his wife Dottie, Admiral Bowman, commander of the 1st District at the time. And anyway, we're going to be looking at a couple of pictures here commemorating the 20th anniversary of the relighting of the Windmill Point Lighthouse on National Lighthouse Day, August 7th, 2002. The Admiral, being a great lover of lighthouses, invited my late dad and I to the 200th anniversary of the Portland Head Lighthouse, and it was the first time that President Bush, 41, decided to have National Lighthouse Day, one day only. We're still hoping that it can be put on the calendars so it's something that's recognized yearly. But this was the very first one, August 7th, 1989, 33 years ago. At the time in 2002, I thought it was a nice idea, and that if we ever did anything on Lake Champlain, that I would try to continue that idea of having National Lighthouse Day. The photo that we're looking at was taken by a friend on August 7th, National Lighthouse Day, over at Windmill Point Lighthouse, featuring my mom Claire, my late dad Lucky Clark, myself, and on the far left in the red shirt, the late Gordy Little. And you can just see a little bit of Calvin here holding his camera. In this photo center, we see my late dad Lucky speaking to the crowd on August 7th, 2002, with Gordy just over his shoulder and Calvin with his trusty camera on the right, my mom and I on the left overlooking, and on the far left, Mr. Art Cohen, the founder of the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. We are now looking at a historic photo which we provided the Grand Isle Rotary Club for use on their calendar in the year 2003. This photo shows the lighthouse keeper's family and their horse, and this was taken approximately 1890. When the lighthouse was still manned. It was manned until 1931 when it was automated. This particular photo shows myself and the senior chief at the time, James Stortle, and my dad receiving the plaque from the Coast Guard for his efforts, and I'll show you next what the plaque reads. This is the plaque that was presented to my dad, and it reads, "Lockwood Lucky Clark, in appreciation of your time and effort working with the United States Coast Guard in relighting of historic Lake Champlain lighthouses, Windmill Point Light, the first of 5, relit August 7th, 2002.
On behalf of the Alburgh Historical Society, the Coast Guard, and the lighthouse owners, Rob and Claire Clark, we'd like to welcome you to the Windmill Point Lighthouse. This is a most auspicious occasion. This is the 20th anniversary, exactly, of the relighting of this lighthouse. Light is in the tower. It is a functioning aid to navigation. Today is also National Lighthouse Day. Hooray. So what could be better? I will make a few announcements. The cooler down here has some bottled water. Feel free to take some bottled water, whatever you need. After the talk, we have more refreshments we'll set out for your enjoyment. And folks, welcome to sit in the shade or wherever stand, sit in the shade, wherever they make themselves comfortable. We do have a few speakers here today, and we have some distinguished guests. We have the Aid to Navigation team of the Coast Guard, U.S. Coast Guard is here. And their officer in charge is Sean Smith. He's going to say just a few words. We also have, like I say, the lighthouse owners, Rob and Claire Clark. And our keynote speaker will be Art Cohn, who's a nautical archaeologist, and he's currently working on projects of shipwreck mapping in the Finger Lakes. So he's got his fingers in all the pies. He's a very busy man. We're really lucky to have him here today. And so I'll just ask, I'll ask Officer Smith to come down and say a few words.
Hey, good afternoon, and thanks for inviting us out here and welcoming my entire crew here. We really appreciate it. And I just wanted to just come up on National Lighthouse Day and support Mr. Clark and for everything that you've done for this lighthouse for the past 20 years. The Coast Guard really appreciates you and your family, so thank you for everything you do.
Okay, you all set? Okay. It's running.
It's running. Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Windmill Point Light Station. It's so nice to see such a bunch of folks out here after all of us have been through with the global pandemic and so forth. It's exactly 20 years ago this evening that we were the first on all of Lake Champlain to relight this Windmill Point Lighthouse. And the old light is over behind where the folks are standing, the Coast Guard is now. That's the old 300 millimeter light that my late dad and I put in, and that served from August 7th, 2002 until October of 2018 when they put the new light emitting diode, the VLB 44, which is currently in service and functional. Like I said, the Coast Guard has been a great group to work with, and it's nice of them to take time from their extremely busy schedule to come out here and speak to us today and be with us and partake in this whole thing. And like I said, this goes back many, many years, basically between this lighthouse here at Windmill and the one at Isle of Mont, roughly 73 years that my family's had an involvement with them. So I think that's pretty significant in its own right. So anyway, like I said, there's a lot of things to know and to talk about and think about here. The old lenses, like the one behind, like the 300 millimeter, and the one that's currently there today, was based off a French physicist, Mr. Augustin Fresnel. And he developed that technology 200 years ago, and it's still relevant today. So I think that's significant as well. Like I said, there's a lot of history out here, and I think Art's going to speak about some of the shipwrecks. The Thunderer that went down here in 1777, and we were just talking earlier, 40 years ago, that he contacted my dad, and his dive team found what they believe is the remains of it. So anyway, like I said, I'm glad that you folks are all out here today to celebrate. Just tell you a little bit about National Lighthouse Day. 33 years ago, on August 7th, 1989, George Bush, 41, decided that they were going to have the 200th anniversary in Portland Head, Maine, of the lighthouse up there. And we had met a man, his name was Admiral Bowman, Richard Bowman. He was the commander of the 1st District in Boston. And my late dad had wrote many letters, and one day we got a letter from the Admiral, and the Admiral was a great lover of lighthouses. He climbed 680 of the 740 lighthouses in the continental United States. And like I said, he's the first one, and I always want to give him credit because he was the first official person that we talked to that had the same feeling that we did, that the light belongs back in the original lighthouse where it is today. And he came up here in 1988, and him and his wife Dottie, and they said, hey, what do you think about putting that light back up there? And we said, well, Admiral, we've always thought about it, but that's the end of where it always ended. And so anyway, like I said, he invited us to go in 1989 to the big ceremony that they had up at Portland Head. And I always said to myself, if we ever do anything here on Lake Champlain, I'd like to see National Lighthouse Day, you know, be here at this lighthouse as well. And so we chose the date of August 7th, 2002 to relight it. Like I say, 20 years ago this evening. And it was the first light to be lit on the lake. And followed by our other light at Isle Mont in October of the same year. And then 3 other lighthouses on the New York side at Belcourt Island and at Split Rock and at Cumberland Head were also relit. Anyway, like I said, I'll be up here all day talking to you, but I just wanted to give you some idea. When they automated the light, they had a skeletal tower, and that's the remains of it over there. The Coast Guard decided they didn't want the liability of having it where it sat in its original configuration, and so I felt that something should be saved, and so being I'm only a one-man show, that's the best I could do. It needs paint, it needs a lot of things. There's a lot of things to be done. Lighthouse keepers are a full-time job. Anyway, folks, like I say, once again, thank you all for coming, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Who's going to
Oh, yes. So now we will have. So unless Roger was going to say a few words.
I would.
Were you going to say a few words about?
I will. I can't talk like Rob though.
Okay. Is he on the star? He wants to know.
Yeah.
I'm Roger Harwood. I'm a past past president of the Mcdonough Historical Association, which is responsible for the Bluff Point Light at Valcourt Island, which Rob mentioned. We also have a light back in our lighthouse. I believe 2004. Thanks to these pioneers, Rob and Lucky and Claire, the lights went back in the lighthouses, and ours was one. We had a steel tower like this, and it's the original height. The Coast Guard removed that light and put it back in the lighthouse. Not long ago, they put an LED in, just like this one. So I just learned that we're going to probably get one of those in the near future to display. So anyway, a great thanks go out to the parks for inspiring the rest of us and around the lake to put the lights back, get the lights put back in. Admiral Bowman did visit our lighthouse and was part of that same inspiration Rob talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Go your chair.
And now we would have Art Cohen, nautical archaeologist, bring us up to speed on whatever he wants to talk about.
There you go.
Thank you, Art.
I want to make sure everybody can hear me. Yes?
Yes.
I've been told that from my years of teaching diving that I have that voice. I will say that when Rob asked me to participate, because I did participate 20 years ago today in the relighting ceremony, I was really delighted to do it. However, when he asked me to speak for 2 hours on this hot day, I thought that was a bit much. So you'll allow me to cut my remarks down to the succinct things I would like to hopefully have you take away with you. When I thought about the perspective, I mean, there's lots of perspectives to gain here today. One is 20 years ago, literally on this day, this light was relit, and I'm going to try to give you some remarks to put that in perspective, and also why we who study Lake Champlain frequently identify it as the most historic body of water in North America. It's also kind of it's wonderful to share that revelation with people, because most people don't know that. I will make one negative comment, forgive me, but I would have liked to seen lots more young people here at the spot today. gaining the perspective of place. We who teach and study history are passionate about it and actually think it could help. And so if people aren't learning it, if people can't see where they came from, it's one of those tools that I think we necessarily have not taken advantage of. So that's the end of my preaching, which I come by naturally these days. But I do want to point out that what we're really, from a human history point of view, from this spot, I'm really interested in this spot. So from this spot, for 12,000 years, you could have sat here and watched native peoples go by. Because that's who was here and that's what they did. And it just turns out that in 1609, if you were here sitting on this spot, you'd see a war party of native peoples coming from the south, and with them were 3 Frenchmen. One of them was Samuel de Champlain. He was here for 3 weeks, decided he liked the lake so much he gave it his name, hence the way we talk about it today. But he also triggered, if you think about the world and world events, you go from an area that has never seen a European or a white person to a place that was embroiled in a European power struggle. France versus Britain, with the Dutch involved, the Spanish involved. It was a world opportunity to claim resources. And I believe if you study history, one of the things you look to is, well, why do we fight for things now? And so I think a big part of what they were fighting for then was the trees. Because if you think about it, the trees were the basic building block of warships and commercial ships. They dominated the world's transportation, and Europe had completely clear-cut their forests. So think about yourself stumbling into the Champlain Valley and looking at both sides of the lake and seeing the vast forest of pine, white oak, and the things that everybody loves to build big ships out of. And that's a big part of what drove the French and the British struggle, in my opinion, for control of this region. The French not only had Samuel de Champlain's visit, which they used to claim the territory, but they then began to back it up by building forts and settlements that really were to say, we're here to stay. If you want to push us out of here, you're going to have to bring armies, navies, and guns, which is in fact exactly what the British did. And so we have a couple of things to put on the timeline here. So why the French still controlled this region? They were giving it, selling it to wealthy Frenchmen, and this spot was sold to a man, Francois Foucault, and he built a windmill in 1743 on this spot, and that's why we call it Windmill Point. It was a real windmill designed to ground grain. Practical, it's what they needed. If you're going to have people in an area with rich farmland, you got to be able to take care of their produce. So that's why this was established. However, he couldn't run it on a regular basis because he was in a war zone. And so the British and the French competed here for decades until 1763, when the British finally won. They bested the French army. You all know about Quebec City and the Plains of Abraham and Montcalm and Wolfe. Some of the great world history takes place on and throughout our lake. And it's left us a legacy of historic sites you can see on land. Crown Point and Fort Ticonderoga, Mount Independence, all those military sites. What it's also left us now, which we now know, is a legacy of tangible, three-dimensional, intact warships from that period. So every one of those episodes that created a fleet has left us remnants of that. During the American Revolution, I don't think there's a better story that we get to tell to ourselves or our kids than the American story of fighting for independence. What did it mean? You want to know what it means, you've got to study the source. And we are in one of the sources of that activity. So when we wonder why the first vessel captured on Lake Champlain in 1775, it's May, it's 3 weeks after Concord and Lexington, they capture Philip Skeen's schooner, and in a journal left behind they said, and we've christened this boat Liberty. So what did they have in mind? They told us. They told us why they were here. They told us why they left their farms. They told us what they were fighting for. And in the world today, I would say, we have perhaps more incentive to understand those connections and those stories than maybe ever before. And so, and there's a small digression I can have in my own story. So 20 years ago, I was here helping the Clarks to relight this lighthouse with the Coast Guard's extraordinary support. 40 years ago, I realized today, I was diving on the lakeside, the broad lakeside of this point, through the courtesy of the Clark family, looking for remnants of the British Radeau gun platform, Thunderer, because it came to grief out here on a rock that sank the Radeau, said Captain William Chambers, who created the first navigable charts of Lake Champlain, which are published actually. And he writes, where he's got two bearings, this is the rock upon which the Radeau struck. So we went out there and started running transects. The boat was a big boat. Think of a modern steel barge made out of wood with massive cannons on its deck. It was a gun platform. Bring it to the place where they're gonna be a battle and, you know, and use it. In this case, we searched, visibility was good. We found objects that almost certainly tied to the period and the circumstance, no boat. And what we then later found is the resourceful settlers after the war came here and saw this warship, all that cut wood ready to be used, all that iron ready to be melted down and turned into something else. They couldn't resist themselves. And so that boat is gone, but the story, where they marked the rock is exactly where the rock is. And it's an otherwise uninteresting, shaly bottom, except for this one massive rock that comes within about 2 feet of the surface. It was the perfect wreck maker. Okay, so the war ends the way we would have liked it to, British people aside, and Lake Champlain was a major feature in all of that. Now the war is over, and so commerce is going to begin in earnest. And so this spot in 1791 was chosen as the port of entry by the federal government for goods coming across the border or going across the border. And so it was all controlled here. And there's great stories about how some of these guys got very rich. The collectors here, it really suggests a Wild West atmosphere. I've studied a really neat account of the steamboat Phoenix, which was padlocked in St. John over some smuggling allegation. They cut it loose in the middle of the night, stole it back, brought it back here. The Canadian customs guy came on board, declared the boat his, and they proceeded to throw him over the side to make his way back home. There's some really extraordinary stories that come with all of that. We also know that there was a lot of interest in owning this strategic point, and one of the people who owned it for a long time and actually litigated to stay owning it was Ira Allen, one of the founders of the state of Vermont. Interestingly, there's another military episode that's going to engulf this place, and it's the War of 1812. And it happens in a way that you might not anticipate. The War of 1812, the prelude to the War of 1812, was the embargo acts passed by the federal government in 1807 and 1808. We were sparring with the British. You see this played out even now with the Chinese. I mean, history hasn't changed that much in 300 years. Where Jefferson, he gets credit for, or blame for the embargo. Jefferson says, we don't like the British, they're encroaching on our territorial imperative. We're passing a law basically saying that no United States citizen will do any trade with the British. They're embargoed, can't do it. Well, you think about this lake, you think about the times, pre-railroad, no canals yet. Almost 100% of the trade from the Champlain Valley went right past Windmill Point into Canada. That's where the market was. And so overnight, some guy in Washington says you can't do that. Well, you can imagine it was not well received, and what we got was a new industry which was really perfected in this part of the world. We called it smuggling. And so at the time, one of the big products, commodities, that was being sent from Lake Champlain into Canada was trees. Trees in the form of log rafts. Log rafts were actually technical watercraft designed to be temporary. You arrange them in a very particular way so you could float massive amounts of timber. Usually it was white oak floating on white pine to get the buoyancy. And they waited for the wind to be right. When the wind was right, they pushed offshore and hoped they made it into Canada. And often they did, and often they had serious mishaps. We have an extraordinary reference that came out of the St. Albans Advisor in 1808 during the early days of the Embargo Act. This is where the American government sent the militia to stop all that illegal trade. And so they had corralled a bunch of rafts, but the local militia were somewhat sympathetic to the log raft guys. And so when the weather was right, so this is what the St. Albans Advisor tells us. May 20th, 1808. On Saturday last evening, the wind being favorable, the then remaining rafts joined together, making, it is said, about 10 acres of timber and carrying 40 sail. And they made an expeditious and safe exit from the United States. And so this was a really dynamic place. They ended up replacing the local militia with militia from Rutland, who didn't know everybody here, and they thought they might get a little better response to that. We then have, between 1812 and 1814, we become one of the major theaters of the War of 1812. And it's going to be maritime, and it's going to be who's going to control the strategic waterway, which is why they were fighting here all those years before. And in our case, we get Commodore Thomas Mcdonough, an extraordinary guy to study, a great hero with great skills and great integrity. He faces the British on September 11th, 1814, and he decisively defeats them in 2.5 hours. And that victory on Lake Champlain allowed America to negotiate the close of the war. Very important, very significant. Lots of lessons in all of that material for us then and us now. It was all going to be about commerce. I mean, there was the Lake Champlain was the natural interstate highway system of the day, as were all these other interconnected waters. But they didn't all interconnect navigation-wise. So we created our internet of 1823 was the canals. You had the Hudson River down there. You had Lake Champlain up here. You had 63 miles of I can't go there. So you cure that by creating a canal, which we did, New York did. It was called the Champlain or Northern Canal, and it was completed in 1823, 2 years before the Erie. And if you read the newspapers of the time, literally within the weeks that followed, it changed the world like the internet changed ours. It just created an explosion of trade, commerce, industry, innovation. The sailing canal boat was invented in St. Albans Bay. And we built a replica of that known as the Lois McClure. So there are connections to that even now. With all of that traffic, the federal government was really in charge. It's a federal waterway and still is. You guys are really in the proud legacy of all of that 200-year history. And it was really the federal government, the Navy, who sent an inspector up here to try to figure out in 1838, we had some lighthouses and we had built some breakwaters, all federally funded. But how do we do it so that there's safety and we're encouraging the commerce? And so the report from Lieutenant Pratt was, in view of safety and the rapidly increasing commerce on the lake, I have selected for permanent lights Windmill Point in Vermont and Crown Point in New York. That's in 1838. They didn't build these lights until 1858. And part of it, I think, was they didn't know what the railroads, which are on the horizon, were going to do to that commerce. And there was a lot of already competition for limited funds. And the other thing that I think really stimulated the actual building of this light was the canal at the north end. Champlain Canal was finished in 1823. You could take your commerce up to St. John's and that was it. That's where it got unloaded. Until 1843, when the Champlain Canal was completed. And that was like opening the interstate to all Canadian waters. The St. Lawrence, Montreal, Quebec City was all available. And ironically, by 1850, we had been so good about harvesting the timber in the Champlain Valley that one guy walking around left a memoir and said, I'm walking on a hillside in the Adirondacks by Lake Champlain, and I can't find a tree large enough to make a respectable fishpole. And in the meantime, on the Canadian side, were untapped, seemingly endless forests. And so this light gets built to facilitate that traffic. And it does it. And as the commerce emerges and changes with the building of the barge canal, which was completed in 1919, and still operates today, that's the canal that operates today. The Coast Guard, the Lighthouse Service, has full jurisdiction to help make this safe, just like your group does today. And the commerce changes as the railroads and the roads come in and now de-emphasize some of the monopoly that the lake has had. And so they're trying to find less expensive ways of doing it. Well, we've got a lighthouse and a keeper and a family, and we keep them on site in all these places, And they realized by the 1930s they had a technology to automate that light through these skeleton towers. They were the breakthrough. The light we replaced 20 years ago was the breakthrough 50 years earlier. And so today we get to enjoy all of that great legacy of history. We get to see it continue. We get to celebrate and commemorate the anniversaries of lighthouses. The War of 1812, 200th anniversary was just a few years ago. It was the excuse to study it and learn from it and share those lessons. The bicentennial of the canal system is next year, 1823, for the Champlain Canal, and 2 years later, 1825, for the Erie Canal, which is why I'm working in the Finger Lakes right now. And so we've got great opportunities, including the 250th anniversary of perhaps the most important touchstone to history and our legacy, and that's the American Revolution. And that's beginning in 2025 and will be active for 8 years. And we hope to take advantage of it here. With that, I would like to just close by thanking the Clarks for their incredible stewardship in the great tradition of Lucky. You followed on and made all of us proud. And I want to thank you guys for your continuous work to keep us safe and to facilitate travel on Lake Champlain. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Eric.
Anybody have any questions for Art?
I'm going to stand around for a while after. You feel free to come up and talk, and I'll tell you some stories and you can tell me.
Thank you very much. And Rob, did you want to say a few closing words?
Well, I can do that. I will have to have you come and run the camera here, I guess.
Okay. All right.
Well, folks, like I said, it's wonderful to hear Art speak. If you need a master of ceremonies, I know he's got a lot to do, but if you ever needed MC, there's the guy you gotta have. No, like I said, it's just tremendous amount of history. I think we're all blessed to be able to be here and to drink it in, if you will. Like I said, I'm going to echo Art's words. It'd be nice if we had younger people out here with us that could, you know, kind of take on some of these things and take it to heart, because I think it's really important. I mean, if we don't get our young people involved, history will definitely repeat itself, because it always does to a certain degree. But I think we can learn so much by keeping these tangible articles. I'm going to echo Art one more time, which is why I saved that skeletal tower, because it tells a story, as Art says. And with nothing there, people would come up here and they would say, well, gee, the light's always been there. No, the light was over there for 70 years. But without having something tangible there, you just can't, you know, explain it. Pictures are fine, but it's nice to go up and actually touch something and say, hey, you know, this is real history. I can really relate to that. And like I said, these towers were so well built. The one down at Split Rock is still standing. That's the oldest of the skeletal towers, 1928. And these towers were originally designed to burn acetylene gas, which was part of the automation process. Acetylene gas, as a lot of you folks might know, is kind of a pretty dangerous thing to have. So they decided that they better do something else. And so they used to have a bank of batteries that would go in that white part over there of the tower. And that's how the light was kept on. And then in the later years, they developed the solar technology. So one solar panel and one battery replaced all that. So we're definitely making a lot of progress from that standpoint. Trying to think what else. Like I said, there's just such a tremendous amount of history. I'll have to have a few cheat notes, I guess, next time. But while we're here, I want to take a minute. There's a young fella here. Joey, come down here. You know, folks, a lot of times, 3 o'clock in the morning, there ain't too many people you can call. But this man right here, I want to take a minute and officially thank Mr. Joe Dumar, ladies and gentlemen. Give him a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Okay. So, folks, with that being said, enjoy yourself. Look around, whatever you want to do. Talk to me. I'll be here. And we got some goodies here the Historical Society's provided.
Before you leave.
Hopefully you can partake in that as well.
Email or phone.
Well, we're gonna. It's awfully hot going up. I'll try to accommodate some people if they really want to go up, but it's a real greenhouse up there. I'm telling you. One of the Coast Guard fellows, Caden. I don't know if Caden's. Yeah, Caden was up there. We had to service the light the other day. Had a battery failure, and boy, I tell you, we sweated to death up there. No air conditioning. This is real 1800s. It's the way it was back in the beginning, folks. So anyway, like I said, I'll see what I can do. Talk to me and we'll see what we can do for you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.
And so, thank you folks for coming out. Like I said, we got goodies, we got definitely stuff to drink. We do not have a bathroom on site, so that's something to keep in mind. Do be careful in some of the woodier sections. There is poison ivy, so do be aware of that, and the uneven ground. And on behalf of the Historical Society of Alburgh, I would again like to thank everyone for coming out, and you can check us out on the Facebook page if you like. I think I forgot to bring our papers with me today, but anyway, because we'd like to have some events, and we'd like to see new faces and old faces too. Anyway, so I know it's hot, so I will let you go. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Garland Paquette. My great-great-great-grandmother, her daughter was the first lighthouse keeper here in this lighthouse.
Until 1862, I believe, right?
Yeah, you know the dates. Her brother was my ancestor, and he is buried in Alburgh Center Cemetery. His name was George Mott, and he was in the War of 1812. So we have a little history going on here in our family. Thank you.
Okay, Garland, thank you very much. Garland Paquette.
So now it's officially in
Well, we're going to wrap up the session of National Lighthouse Day here at Windmill Point Lighthouse in Alburgh, Vermont. Had a good turnout. Hopefully a lot of folks had enjoyed themselves, had a nice time here. I know I did. Thankful that the weather cooperated and that it didn't pour rain like it has there in the last few days. But I'm going to see if we can close this out, like I said. And for lack of something better to say, in memory of our old friend Gordy Little, and who knows where we'll be next time for our little corner. Thanks for listening.